Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. Baltimore positive. We are positively into that weird tampering week. We promised to tamper with the Maryland Crab Cake tour schedule. I swear I'm putting this thing together. I'm just working on this crazy little documentary. I'm working on this opening day thing. I'm working on sunning myself in Sarasota, amongst other things. But there's things happening, and every minute of every day, I'm getting another WNST text, and it keeps beginning with former Ravens. Luke Jones joins us now, not from Owings Mills, although he was in Owings Mills with Justin Matabika, who got all the money. Nobody else getting any of the money. All the other money's coming from the TV contract, and all the Scott Hansen we're watching around here being split up amongst the other 31 teams that are coming in here. And someone said feeding at the carcass. And I thought, boy, that's rough, dog. Luke, it's we knew this is coming. I mean, like, come on, dude. We're professionals around here. We're not outraged people and idiots out on the interwebs, not realizing this is happening and rumoring that Derrick Henry's headed here on a bus tomorrow. But it's been a weird couple of days all the way around. I was texting with Chad Wiesling, what happened to the kid in Green Bay? Running backs just getting thrown out back doors. And we're not even like to the front of free agency yet. It's still the tampering period.
It is, but it's funny you mentioned the running backs. That market's moved much more quickly than anyone would have thought, though. Now, is it as lucrative as it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago, relatively speaking? No, of course not. But that's been interesting to see, and who knows? I mean,
There's been an acceptance of the artificial deflation of the
I mean, there has, but you look at some of those deals that have been done. I mean, there are a few of those deals where I would absolutely say, Nestor, no thanks for that price for that specific running back. So who knows? Derrick Henry and the Ravens could be a fit. As you look at the dance partners that are out there, Aaron Jones, who released by the Packers, would not count against the comp pick formula, as we should know that matters for the Ravens. We'll see how it plays out. But getting back to the Ravens free agents, what we saw on day one is about what you expected to see. And when I say day one, to your point, none of it's official yet. It's day one of the negotiating window, the quote legal tampering, and it's about what you would expect. Other than probably the only thing that I was surprised to see was Patrick Queen not finding a home right away, but that doesn't mean he's not leaving. It doesn't mean he's not getting paid. It's just that wasn't a deal that was consummated right away. But you look at the guys that the Ravens did lose. Geno Stone staying in the AFC North, going to Cincinnati. I think it's always juicier when a player stays in the division. Yeah, in the same way that if a Steeler or a Bengal or a Brown comes to Baltimore, it's always a little more interesting
Tiki
that way.
Barber wasn't thrilled with that.
What with Saquon Barkley going to Philadelphia? Yeah, that kind of a weird little weird feud on Twitter or X, whatever it's called. But you go down the list of the Ravens free agents that have found homes elsewhere. Gus Edwards going to the Chargers, reuniting with Greg Roman, reuniting with Joe Ortiz, John Harbaugh to Jim Harbaugh. That's not shocking. I think if Gus Edwards was going to come back, it was going to be on the cheap. It was going to be as more of a complimentary role because we saw how that looked this past year with him being the lead guy. It wasn't what you wanted to see in terms of a lead back. So he's out the door. I think of the names that departed on Monday, and again, none of this is official. I think the one name that stood out to me as far as someone that I think the Ravens, all things being equal, had some hope that maybe he'd be back, would have been Ronald Darby, who ends up going to Jacksonville, 2 years, value up to $10 million. So, what the base value is, hard to say, but it's markedly more than he got with the Ravens this past year, but he played well for them. He filled in. We've talked about it. Marlon Humphrey missed about half the season, and Ronald Darby was the primary substitute for him, and he did a nice job. But
Do you
so
think that they're really high on Humphrey? Listen. I mean, I've met the kid. I've dealt with the kid. Like, I've said it out loud. Alabama mouth Vanderbilt trophy case as far as the NFL goes. But
mhm.
like the injury and the fact that whatever reliability, and not comparing Ronnie Stanley to anybody else, but it feels to me when they let a Darby go over that amount of money, it either says they didn't love him, but sort of the tape didn't lie. He was out on the field, right? As to what he is. I mean, his ceiling's nowhere near what Marlon Humphrey's ceiling. Right? We can all agree. I agree on the player Marlon Humphrey. I'm wondering about the injured, getting older, now filthy rich player, as to what you're going to get out of that player and what they expect. Do they expect him to be elite? Do they expect him to play to that number? Like, I don't know. I sort of don't, because I'm old and getting gray, and I've watched every really fast guy when they're 22 and 23 and where they are when they're 29 or 30 and what you expect from them in a leadership way, becoming a safety, becoming more of, playing situationally. Jimmy Smith being a great example of a guy they loved. They loved him when he had one leg. They were still running him out there because they loved him. I don't know where they are with Marlon. You're in the locker room. Somehow I'm not allowed anymore, so I don't get to ask these questions.
Well, are they as high on Marlon Humphrey as they were 2 or 3 years ago? At the beginning of this contract extension he got in 2020? No, but you just look at the dollars and the cap structure. If they cut him today, it would actually cost them money on their cap. It'd be like $24 million in dead money, and it would actually be an acceleration to the point where some money, their cap space would actually shrink a little bit. So
what you're saying is they have to live with him. I got that.
For another year, right?
But what do they really think they're getting out of the player? I mean, this is where, when I knew football coaches and stuff, you always sort of DNA'd about, like, he's lost a step, but, like, hey man, he's still really good. We're paying him too much, but we can't replace him for, like, cut his pay in half and bring him back, great, but, like, that's still not, he's not going to be happy, and that's not going to make him a better player. I feel that way about Stanley. I feel that way about, like, Stanley's never going to be what he was. Humphrey, I'm questioning it now. I don't know. Maybe he's even questioning it now, especially when speed's your game.
Yeah, I think you just, to me, kind of took the words right out of my mouth as far as how I think they view him at this point in time. Clearly, he had the injuries this past year, the foot surgery in August, had 2 different calf injuries. So, it's not as though he had this catastrophic ACL, catastrophic Achilles injury where he has a lengthy rehab or anything like that, but he missed roughly half the season. When you look at the games he missed and parts of games that he missed. In fact, it could be even a little bit over half the season in terms of snaps. I'd have to go back and look, but I think there's still an expectation that if he's healthy, that he's still going to play at a high level. I mean, he made the Pro Bowl in 2022. It's not like this guy is 4 or 5 years removed from his best season in the way that Ronnie Stanley is at this point in time.
Well, I'll make it clear. I think he's a gifted guy. And we talk about Kyle Hamilton at this point, very early on. That's what Marlon Humphrey flashed, that, sort of greatness for a minute, and that's why Matabike this week, I'm not a one-hit wonder. They all carry that chip with them to say, am I going to get better? Am I going to get worse? Because they all want to be Aaron Donald, but Aaron Donald's Aaron Donald because, like, Phil Savage introduced me to him in Mobile, Alabama 12 years ago and said, and 12 years later, he's never taken a game off. What I mean? Like, that's where it is, let alone being injured and having all this. And, in Marlon's case, running his mouth just a lot. And just, I like, he's made a lot of money and a lot is expected of him. I mean, we expect him to be Rob Woodson, right? I mean, like, literally, kind of, sort of. I think he could come back and play well, but I wouldn't bet on it.
I mean, I'd bet on him coming back and playing well. Now, is he going to be an all-pro selection? That's where you start to get into, okay, where does he rank in the hierarchy? But like I said, from a cap standpoint, it's really, if you're down on him, and I'm not saying, when I say you, I'm just saying in a general sense, if you're down on him to the point where you're starting to wonder if the value is really there, you're kind of looking at next year being where, okay, do we move on next year? Do we look to draft his replacement, whatever?
All the more reason to think you might want Darby around for the next year.
Yeah, but at the same time, let's be clear. If you have concerns about Marlon Humphrey, you should have greater concerns about Ronald Darby, because you look at his injury history. I mean, he stayed healthy for the Ravens last year, but there was a reason why he was available in late August last year. It's because of his injury history. So from that standpoint, through that lens, look, I would have liked to have had Ronald Darby back as my number 3 corner, as my top outside corner. That's a reserve that would allow me, if I want, I can move Humphrey inside to the nickel spot in certain situations, depending on how you're going to deploy Kyle Hamilton. But for Humphrey, even a post June 1st, you're looking at, okay, you could save $11 million on the cap, still $11 million in dead money then. And oh yeah, you have to replace him. So from that standpoint, it's very prohibitive to, and that's why I said early in the offseason, not your suggestion. I saw this on Twitter. I saw people spitballing about it as you're kind of looking at, okay, what's your cap? How healthy is your cap situation? What can you do? What are the potential moves? All that.
Well, you're
And
not getting a
people,
corner in a draft that you really think you're going to go play with.
I
Like,
mean,
really.
not 30th. I mean,
Oh,
is there
you're already drafting a tackle, dude. Like, right? I mean, we
exactly
can't, right? So like that. I'm just saying, even at 30, even whatever they get, they're not
not a
getting
day
a
one guy?
starting corner. They're not getting a starting corner in April. So they're going to go to the Derby market, and maybe they think, well, that's where we'll find our market. We'll find a corner off the edge of a roster who's 30. I mean, they've done this for years. I mean, you have to do it. You're going back to Fabian Washington for, you know what I mean? You have to do it. And good years and bad years, you could, you wrote a lot about corners, right? Around here and wide receivers. And when guys get injured, speed guys get injured, it just, you can't replace them. And I'm wondering who, okay. So to my thought on this with Darby and others is just, they really do believe Humphreys is going to be okay and going to be
Yeah.
really good. That we still have we still have a guy.
Yeah. And even if it's a case where you say Brandon Stevens and him are 1 and 1A, in whichever order you want, right? I think they're at least that comfortable with where
But I
Marlon
don't
Humphrey
think
is.
they're Brandon Stevens high like Ladarius Webb high, like where he's in line to get the next big load of money because they don't have the load of money to give, right?
Well,
Like,
that right. I mean, they're at a point at this point in time, and Eric even touched on this because Monday before the negotiating window opened, they did their Justin Matabike press conference, with Eric DaCosta and Zach Orr was, they were flanking Matabike. Eric alluded to this. You have a certain number of guys. One, they've got to be those elite guys that you want to pay, right? Those guys that you want to give top of market money, even though the Matabike deal is already aging pretty favorably when you look at what Chris Jones got and you look at what Christian Wilkins got going from the Dolphins to the Raiders. The Matabike deal, assuming he continues to play at a high level, and what we saw in 23 is a reasonable facsimile of what you're going to get, even if it's not going to be 13 sacks, but say 8 to 10 sacks per year at the very least, you're going to be okay with that number with his age and his production, and you're seeing where the market's going on that front. But the point is, you don't want to just artificially identify, okay, this guy's one of our better players. We're going to pay him lucrative money. No, they need to truly be elite guys when you're talking about where the Ravens stand or where Cincinnati stands with Joe Burrow. And, we're going to see what happens with T. Higgins because, yeah, they'd like to keep T. Higgins, but they have Jamar Chase. And can you pay 2 wide receivers lucrative money like that? So every team figures this out because every team has players that they fancy are their elite talents. But what I'm saying is it better be an elite talent. And to your point, and this is nothing against Brandon Stevens, if we're looking at this time period where presumably Marlon Humphrey, not this year, but maybe next year, and certainly looking at him moving forward, is no longer going to be in that elite cornerback money conversation, that doesn't mean Brandon Stevens is stepping into that because, oh, yeah, you're going to have to pay Kyle Hamilton top of the market money at safety. And you're doing that now with Matabike at defensive tackle. And, so it's always a moving target. You're always.
But if they're going to be 13-4 2 years from now, those guys are going to be playing top of class. And the way that this past year, Ronnie Stanley, Odell Beckham, Marlon Humphrey, they had guys making a lot of money that weren't,
Yeah.
but Hamilton, Linderbaum, they had players stepping up, and Roquan and Lamar suited up, made it all the way through. Those are top of class guys, and that's how you win 13 games. But there are questions going into this year,
Sure,
with the money they're dragging with Stanley, the money they're dragging with Humphrey, to say they were, but are. And that's the difference between Marshall Yonda at the end of his career, who still was, right? And even Ray at the end of his career still had something to offer. You don't have anything to offer if you can't protect my quarterback and you're my left tackle, and you really don't have anything to offer if you're a cornerback and you're at 88% and 30 years old, because you're going to get crushed.
Well, Marlon Humphrey's not that old, but your point's well taken. And I mean, that's part of this. And everything you just laid out, the margin for error shrinks at this point in time when you look at beginning with your quarterback. And again, it's not a Lamar thing. It's any elite franchise quarterback that's making top of market. I mean, look at Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts. I mean, they just signed Saquon Barkley, and there's a thought with Jalen Hurts. It's like, hey, you need to play way more like you did in 2022 than you did this past year. I mean, it's
Even
always
the
the case.
Falcons have a franchise quarterback now, right?
They do with Kirk Cousins, and it's amazing. You know, they last year they said, "Oh no, we don't need Lamar. We're good with Desmond Ritter," and well, they have a new head coach as a result of that
Steelers
kind
got
of
a
thinking.
Super Bowl champion for free. They just handed it to him, you know?
They did a Super Bowl champion a decade ago, but that is true. But you just, I mean, you look at it, it's just it. Whenever you have when you're paying a franchise quarterback top of market money like the Ravens are with Lamar, and again, this is no different than anyone else. Your margin for error with the rest of your roster building shrinks. And when you look at it, and this is where I tell everyone, take a deep breath. You know, day one, yeah, they lost 5 players. I get it. And the only guy they brought back was Malik Harrison, who's a, reserve special teams guy, right? I mean, that's where he is. Versatile player, nice player, but certainly not a guy that moves the needle. But you have to look at it through this lens. When you look at where the Ravens are cap wise, you look at Justin Madubuike becoming the latest of their list of guys that are making either top of market or near top of market at their respective positions. Geno Stone, third safety. John Simpson, yeah, I get it. He was their leading, he played more offensive snaps than anyone on the team this past year, but their 5th best starting offensive lineman this past year. Ronald Darby, their number 3 corner. Gus Edwards, who at best was going to be a number 2 running back for them in 2024, even though we don't know who their starter is going to be yet. And Devin Duvernay, who we didn't even mention. I was surprised to see Duvernay get 2 years, up to $8.5 million. Look, he's a nice return player, but return specialist. But in this day and age, I was surprised to see him get what he
I don't
got.
think Trevor Lawrence said he's a weapon.
Right. I mean, good for him. I'm happy for him. Nice kid, and he was, 2-time Pro Bowl return specialist, but not the kind of guy I'd be targeting on day one of free agency, to say the very least. So
Everybody
I
loves
just,
Geno Stone too, right?
yeah. Well, I mean, hey, Geno Stone's gonna be a starting safety for the Bengals, and look, he played so well for the Ravens this year to the point where this was as much about opportunity for him as it was to go out and make a little bit of money, right? I mean, the Ravens certainly weren't going to pay him 2 years, $15 million to remain as their number 3 safety like he was. So he goes somewhere else. But the guys I just named, they're either backups or guys that you're looking at as, in a case of John Simpson, he was the weak link on the starting offensive line.
Or as
So
Eric used to say, just a guy.
I mean, right. I mean, these are all players that if you can't replace these guys, then that doesn't say much for your drafts the last couple of years. That doesn't say much for your ability to go out and find value free agents and day 3 draft picks and undrafted free agents and things of that nature. And look, the Ravens, say what you want about them, they've been very effective with that part of their roster over the years. So, yeah, there are a couple guys in there. I would have liked to see them bring back Darby if they could. All things being equal in a perfect world, yeah, you'd love to keep Geno Stone, but these are not the names that are going to make or break their 2024 season, and that's what I'm trying to stress here. We have this conversation every year. Fans who have amnesia panic this time of year, but the ones who remember and the ones who know how this time of year typically works for, let's face it, not just the Ravens, but the teams that are perennially good, teams that are contenders year after year after year. You didn't see too many of those all that active on Monday. There's a reason why you see the teams active that you do on Monday, and it's typically because, one, they have cap space, but why is that? It's because they weren't very good and they've moved on from players and all of that. So, other than the teams that have a quarterback on a rookie contract, what you're seeing is typically lesser teams that are active at the beginning of free agency. And, we'll see how it plays out. And I do expect the Ravens to make a signing or two. It's not as though they're going to sit it out entirely, but they have to be more value minded. They have to be more bargain minded in terms of what they do. And that's why I thought it was so interesting to see the running back market move as much as it did. And at the end of day one, you have Derrick Henry and Aaron Jones sitting there, and it's got to be at your price. And as I said to you all along, I've
Eckler's
never
on the
been.
street. It's just a whole bunch of names of people we know, right? Like literally, right? And for all the fantasy players, all the names matter because they touch the ball and people know who they are. There's a lot of names.
Oh, sure, no question. But at the same time, it was a lot of names that have already found dance partners. And in most cases, looking at a lot of them, not at the price that I'd be looking at them. So, we'll see what it looks like with Derrick Henry. Does a team like the Cowboys, who lost Tony Pollard, do they jump in and try to sign a name? Which is a thing the Cowboys used to do, but they've been a team even that, for as much as we make fun of the Cowboys, they have not been as active early in free agency in recent years. So, you're trying to figure it out. And as I've said to you all along, people listen to me and think, oh, you don't like Derrick Henry or you don't like veteran running backs. No, it's not that. It's I don't like veteran running backs at a price where I am paying them for what they've done in the past. I want to pay a guy for what I think he's going to
What's
do.
Derrick Henry worth?
I mean, there were some reports out there, and look, it's no one reputable that I would hang my hat on to know for sure that the Ravens could be, they could be in on him if it's 6 million a year, 7 million a year, something like that. I'd be more than okay with that. I don't like the projections that were out there where you're paying him 2 years, 20 million. You're paying a running back 10 million a year who's 30 years old. As great as Derrick Henry has been, that is an outlier. And you're going to bet on him continuing to be an outlier as he gets older and there's more
Do
and
you
more
think Derrick
mileage.
Henry can have a really good season this year with the Ravens? I mean,
Sure.
that's a question, and this
Sure.
is this is just me throwing it out. And
Hmm.
Eric, if he's listening, he can hear it out. The Odell Beckham thing that they did last year and gave him all that money, they would get a whole hell of a lot more mileage and a whole hell of a lot more help for Lamar. If Derrick Henry's lined up healthy behind Lamar, I mean, hell, if Lamar got hurt for a couple weeks, they'd have a chance. Like, and it's not that I think so much of Derrick Henry. I do, but I just think like that kind of guy he's very unicornish to me for what he can do, and a guy that you don't want to tackle after 3 o'clock on a cold day and late in the season when Lamar hasn't been a great, going and playing in Buffalo, going and playing in a hailstorm in Kansas City, whatever. I don't know, dude. They gave Odell Beckham the phone book last year to come in here and preen around and catch as many balls as Nelson Aguilar. Um, I keep going back, and you and I have definite differences of opinion. And despite what Chad Steele remembers or Dick Cass, I was in the locker room every single week in 2019. Mark Ingram to me felt like a real insurance policy that nothing else has felt like for Lamar. And probably because the kid kept getting hurt, right? I mean, in Dobbins, he was there for a minute there in training
Hmm.
camp there, certainly in the gym. Last time I was allowed in the building, he's yelling out of the gym, I'm going to be back, yelling at the media, like whatever. Like I love the kid. He didn't get there. And I just think there's an insurance policy for Lamar there that if it's over $1.5 million, I mean, if we're arguing 6 and 7's a good idea, but 8 or 9's a bad idea, I I don't know, man. I don't. And no offense to Josh Jacobs, who I love Chad Weisling, my friend who represents him, and Josh has been a good kid, been on the show and like all that stuff. To me, Derrick Henry's a different kind of cat, and I think you get off the bus feeling a little different, Derrick. I'm just saying, I would have
Yeah.
said that in October.
At the same time, you probably would have said the same thing about Dalvin Cook 2 years ago, and you saw he's done now. You mentioned Mark Ingram. That was true, and I agree with you wholeheartedly in 2019. How'd he look in 2020? I mean, I hear everything you're saying, but you're talking about taking a calculated risk and with a position that he is already defying. He already for a few years now is defying conventional thinking as far as how running backs age. And at some point in time, he's not going to look like Derrick Henry anymore. And that's where I say, okay, 6 or 7, maybe as high as 8, maybe I wouldn't love it, but I'd at least say, okay. But if you're getting more into that, I mean,
Well, Gus
you're
Edwards being a great example, like goes out to the Chargers. Like, no offense to Gus Edwards, but it always sort of promised something that I felt like the offensive line delivered as much as Gus Edwards delivered in the
Mm,
fourth quarter a couple of years ago. But you can argue that maybe I don't remember the Gus bus in that way running people over, and he did, but it never looked like Derrick Henry to me. You know what I mean?
well,
Like if Derrick Henry's three-quarters of what he is, it'll look like Gus Edwards to me on his best day. That's how I feel about it.
no, I hear you, but you still have to value a player. I mean, you're kind of you're presenting it through a lens of player A or player B, but it's like, okay, player A at what price relative to your salary cap, which you mentioned the offensive line. That's still a massive part of this, and we don't know what their offensive line is going to look
Hey,
like. And that's
dude,
where,
I'll hear you. I listened to
right,
you last week, and I believe
right.
you. Before they go
So,
chasing Derrick Henry, they better figure out how to replace Zeitler.
and that's my big thing. And look, maybe some of their thinking is, okay, we might take a step back as an offensive line, and maybe we feel Derrick Henry for one more year, and if we have to give him 2 years, but it's one good year, basically what Mark Ingram did for them, then okay. Again, I don't want to present this as though I hate Derrick Henry. I don't. I think Lamar Jackson with Derrick Henry is a really, really fun idea, but we also have to acknowledge at some point in time he's not going to look like Derrick Henry anymore. And
Well, it feels like a
the
much
clock,
more fun idea than Odell Beckham, who was never going to catch 80 balls here, and
but
like he
but
was
you
just going to
see,
be.
you
He
have
looked
to
good
look.
getting off the bus, Odell Beckham.
You
I
have to
said,
look at, but Odell Beckham, that we can't look at that move in a vacuum. That move was very much, there was a Lamar Jackson tax to that. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, he was
that's
worth
not
it
how
from a
grown-up
leadership.
organizations usually work, but I'll
You got to
hear
sign your
that.
franchise quarterback.
Yeah.
You got to sign your franchise quarterback. We can go back and play the tape from last year or 2 years ago because you were more of a Lamar hater, and I wasn't an apologist, but I was a realist from the standpoint of
Hater is so it's
I,
so
I
strong to
I'm
say
going a
that.
little WWE on you, but at the same time, what did I say to you over and over? Okay, you're not going to re-sign Lamar to do what? To go draft a quarterback and stink for the next 3 years? Like he's one of the best in the league.
Well, you've also built a
Anyway,
team around him, which
but
would
the
which made
point
it.
and again, Beckham to Derrick Henry, it's apples to oranges. It's different positions. I mean, the valuation, $15 million for a wide receiver is not the same as $15 million for a running back. $15 million for a wide receiver doesn't even put you in the top 5 for compensation.
But
At
I'm
this
thinking
point.
about touching the ball. I'm thinking about
I
value to the
understand, but
offense. I think
they
about
got to throw the
value to the
football though.
quarterback.
They've got to be able to throw the football. I mean, they have. People keep want, and not you, but when I hear people keep talking about running back, running back, running back, this team finished first in the league in rushing last year. I mean, unless Derrick Henry's going to come in and average 8 yards per carry or something crazy, which by the way, Keaton Mitchell, who they didn't even have to spend a draft pick on, did that last year. So again, how much do they really truly need a dominant running back when they have Lamar and the Lamar effect on that running back
All
position?
right, you talk me out of the running back again. Fine, let's go get a guard.
Not,
Let's
no,
go. It won't be sexy, but let's go get a guard.
again, these are not, it's not yes or no. The proposition is never yes or no. It's what player at what price. And that is more my argument against spending a lot of money on a running back. And by the way, I'm much more, I don't want to say much more. I'm as intrigued, let's say, of Aaron Jones, who just got released, albeit had a season where he had some injuries this past year for the Packers, but has been a very productive running back, is also considered a good locker room guy, very highly respected in Green Bay. You don't have, he's a guy that if you sign him, he's not going to count against your comp pick formula. So there are other options. I mean, we'll see how it plays out. But in general, I was just surprised though to see the running back market move as much as it did. If you had told me all those running backs would have a home after day one of the negotiating window, again, unofficial, we all get that, anyone listening. But if you had said that and Patrick Queen is still negotiating with teams, I would have thought it'd be the other way around. I would have thought Queen might have been a guy I thought would agree to terms in the first hour or two of free agency. And to be clear, that doesn't mean the market is cool on him. It's just some guys are, their agents are working on certain things or waiting things out, whatever it
Well, if
might
you have
be.
two teams bidding against each other, you're still winning.
Yeah. But I was
you
just,
haven't won the war yet.
yeah, I was just surprised. I mean, keeping it talking about the AFC North. I mean, how about the Bengals? I mean, to go sign Zach Moss from the Colts, who I think is one of the better value signings of all the running backs that could be out there. And they released Joe Mixon. So, I wasn't necessarily expecting that on the first day of free agency. So, we'll see how it plays out. But the running back market has moved. We'll see where the Ravens are with Derrick Henry. We'll see where they are with Aaron Jones, or we'll see if they wait it out and go via the draft. But the early prices, as is usually the case, guard market kind of exploded, right? I mean, see some of these guards getting high into the eight figures in
Well,
terms of
Zeitler may have known something, huh?
or the Ravens did, although at the same time, I mean, Zeitler wanted to be a Raven. He wanted an extension even last
Hey,
offseason. So
look, dude,
I
we spent 3 days here thinking Matabike was going to be tagged, and boom, they said, so like to
you
think
never
that
know.
where their hearts and their heads are when they go home with their wife and say, do I really want to play in Jacksonville for money, or do I want to be here? And in Matabike's case, just to put a bow back on that, you were at the press conference the other day.
Mhm.
I would just say for him, if you think the market for Chris Jones and the other guys and what that market exploded to say, could he have squeezed a few more nickels and gone to Atlanta the way Kirk Cousins did or whatever? Maybe that market would have been better, or maybe this was the market for him and his agent when they hit that 3 hours before closing deadline last week and said, go home and think about it. Go make some calls. Come back to me on Friday. We'll figure it out, because he couldn't go anywhere and he didn't want to go anywhere else. And the next thing you know, he's got a press conference on Monday and they've got a deal, and the Ravens have cap relief. And we wouldn't have predicted that. We didn't predict that on Thursday, right? So to
No.
think that Zeitler goes out and shops in the way that Lamar went out and shopped and comes back, but it does feel like that's not in play. And certainly, Patrick Queen and other things, they just don't have any money, right? In that way.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to, you can create more cap space, but there's always a cost to that. And there's always, you can renegotiate deals, but then that has a cost. You pay the piper 3-4 years down the line with what accelerations look like and dead money and all that. So, that's part of it. But, I think we'll see how it plays out. I mean, you know, I'm guessing Zeitler is going to get a nice contract from somebody based on what we've seen from, to me, okay, younger guards, yes, but lesser guards in terms. I mean, look at John Simpson. Even with the Jets, I mean, he got 2 years up to $18 million. I mean, look, I love John Simpson. Nice guy, good story, revitalized, rejuvenated his career, coming from the Raiders to the Ravens this past year. But up to, and again, when we say up to, we know it's phony money, right? Let's say it's not 2 years 18, but let's say it's 2 years 14, whatever it is. Is he a $7 million guard? I'd say no. I think you have either internal options, with some of the young guys they have, or there are always guys like John Simpson going to be available at some point. So, we'll see where it lands with Zeitler. We'll see where Patrick Queen winds up. That's going to be pertinent for the Ravens in terms of a comp pick. And yeah, we'll see if they do sign a veteran running back. And again, I'm not opposed to the idea. I'm opposed to throwing a ton of money at that idea, because Derrick Henry at age 30 is not necessarily going to be Derrick Henry at age 26, let alone talking about even what he was last year or the year before. I mean,
Well, it also speaks to who the Ravens think they can get at 62, and where they are in the second and third round in this draft, because they, nobody does this better than they do it and project it out and think it. Like whatever they're doing, there is a plan. Except for the Earl Thomas thing, but other than that, every other thing's had a plan. Luke Jones has a plan. He'll be in Owings Mills whenever called upon. We will be in Sarasota when called upon next week as well as Orlando. So we're going to be on the road a little bit this month. We're taking the Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with our friends at Window Nation. I have my Window Nation window siding doors. Doors is the key part there. I am not a certified master installer, but I know one. 866-90-NATION. Our friends at Wise Markets also putting us back out on the road. So, we're putting the Crab Cake Tour together. We're doing it at Fadley's on Fridays. Our friends at Jiffy Lube are in. Liberty Pure Solutions keep my water clean. Royal Farms back in this baseball season. So please go support our sponsors. We say that often. We play commercials around here on the radio side, and certainly have it all at BaltimorePositive.com. But we are breathing in so we can breathe out into April and beyond for new baseball ownership, onto the draft, into free agency, all of it at WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore positive.